Buenos días, María Isabel. Buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone. We need to remind you that this seminar is part of the 20th anniversary of the Humboldt Institute and the Environmental National System in Colombia. We are gathered here after 20 years of work, and we need to remind you that this seminar is being streamlined, and you can download the stream later. We are going to have English and Spanish translation, and you can follow it through social media and Twitter, especially the Humboldt Institute website, and asking questions, comments. The tag is pound seminar 2020. We also want to remind you a few recommendations. Take care of your personal effects. Yesterday we had a few glitches, and to use the translation monitors, and please don't block. Please work out with translator, because yesterday there were phone calls and all that, and please you can use your cell phones because they do cause interference throughout the program. I want to introduce you to our moderator, Juan Carlos Bello. He's the coordinator for information and knowledge for Humboldt Institute. He's going to the MC. Juan Carlos is a biologist out of Javeriana University, and he's an IT expert, and as of 2011 works with us at the Institute. Our panel members are José Cerucán, he's national coordinator for the National Commission of Youth and Biodiversity. Christian Samper, CEO of Wildlife Conservation Society. Jean-Patrick Leduc, he is the Director of European Affairs in Paris. And Kim Jin-han, and he is a Research Director for Korea Biological Resources. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Maria Isabel, and good morning, everyone. It is an honor to share the floor with people who have represented biodiversity in such a way, and to be able to have interesting visions and at the Humboldt Institute in the next 20 years. This morning, we're going to work with two languages. We're going to go between English and Spanish. Please be a little patient. The idea is to have a very interactive morning with our facilitator. We're going to have several changes in the agenda and to squeeze this as much as we can, and your participation also. And I would like to start by saying that, of course, we are going through
grandes transformaciones en todos los sentidos. Obviamente, las tasas de transformación de los sistemas naturales son cada vez más altas. También hay transformaciones sociales, políticas, económicas muy importantes.
And everything is going very, very fast. There are very quick changes, and amongst all this, and knowledge are key to make decisions on development routes. So I would like to start with that. For the discussion this morning. The second thing is that, at least from the Humboldt Institute context, we have been established amidst the environmental system. It is a research institute, but it hasn't been created under the context of Science and Technology National Institute. Something different because the goals are aimed towards conservation and science, but the use of scientific knowledge to have development in the country from what we call the environmental sector, and it is key because the conductor for this discussion this morning has to do exactly with the role that in national institutions, as the Humboldt Institute, and having the implementation of the interface between science, society, and politics through knowledge and the building of knowledge, the distribution of knowledge, the use of knowledge. So this panel is going to have as a link and conductors the role of these institutes and entities and agencies, I'm sorry, in the process of building knowledge, and within that interface, then we have science, politics, and society. So I would like to invite you to keep a discussion around these conductors, and always thinking about innovation, how we can make things better, how we can have much more impact on nationally and internationally. From this perspective, I would like to start with the first panel. It's not going to be like yesterday. We won't have an introduction. I'd like to jump in, on specific questions, and then, sure enough, if there is a proposal, and it is thinking about our audience, if we could consider the fact of having a more direct dialogue between our panel members and the audience. So, if it is possible, for you to speak in Spanish, so if you could also ask direct questions, that would be great. With this, I would like to start by asking a question, and I hope that we can be open-minded and to just break away with traditional schemes. And the first question I would like to ask is, do you think that from the information and knowledge perspectives for decision making, a national institute, is that relevant? Thinking that decision-making policies are very specific on a context like the Colombian context, where we have everything is so complex and we have so many individual issues. The feeling is that it isn't possible to gather all those needs, and the demand is bigger than the answer. So we have the idea of a national institute for biodiversity. Is that current from that perspective, from society, science, and politics, and knowledge? Is that possible? Okay. Before anything else, I would like to thank the fact that I'm here with the Institute, and it is a great invitation. We were very lucky that Humboldt Institute invited us from Mexico by their current director and someone who was very close to Christian. And this is a party where we're very happy to take part. So again, congrats for this first 20 years, and we bid you many more. I'd say yes, it is very important to have a national institute or a national agency, but from there, we would need to modulate what we understand as a national institute. I don't think that there is one place that could undertake every task needed for this. And I think that combination, from having one place of compiling information to put it to use for decision makers, maybe a peasant somewhere or the Ministry of Agriculture in the country, but to take part, and I think that this is the most important thing, to every national institution or in the country who have something to say or something to contribute. So it's been Cornavi's model. We are not a research institute. No, it's not a research institution on the first floor. If we talk about the bank, so we're second tier. Research in the field is conducted by every research institution and university, and it has a lot of advantages. And one of the most important ones is to get to the empowering feeling in terms of information by the academia and research society. So I think that's very important because there won't be one institute. I don't even think about the most advanced countries could scope from A to C everything they need. So they need to put all these needs and knowledge, and to have a way of summarizing information and communicating that to decision makers. It's not just those decision makers in the government, but also the ones, a grammar school kid who wants to do homework and he needs information, and from there to the Minister of Environment. So this is pretty much necessary. The country with a big number of institutions and information about biological diversity, that's the best one is the United States. You see the number of museum, arboretums, but they don't have a way of gathering everything together, and they haven't been able to gather everything that satisfies them throughout their needs. And I always say that it's very curious and funny that where this has happened has been in developing countries, mega diverse countries, and they don't necessarily have a big tradition in science like the European countries or the American ones, America and Canada. Then we go Mexico, Costa Rica, Humboldt, and now Brazil, Sao Paulo, South Africa, and maybe the only exception that we could find is the former Again in Australia, and for us was an inspiration to the National Commission of Biodiversity. I think that yes, it is indispensable, and I do believe that one of the reasons, or not the first one, or not the only one, I'm sorry, all these agreements and goals that we have agreed upon at CDB or TDB, whatever you want to call it, or international agencies haven't been met because in many of these countries, they have a big biodiversity. They don't have the knowledge to make the right decisions, protecting, using, and benefiting society. So, yes, it is necessary. Yes, we should encourage this, and the fact that we need this type of agencies. And I'm very happy that today we're going to renew the commitment and interest for the National Institute in Costa Rica, which is the oldest one in Latin America, Cornavi and Humboldt, with an agreement that will renew something that we wanted to do for many years, and it was to put this at the disposal of the people who needed it. So I would stop there and of course there will be other issues.
Okay, sorry, I will speak in English. And also, I want to thank Humboldt Institute, for organization of this meeting, which is very interesting. And just to be honest, to say that I was very impressed about what is done today in Colombia. But maybe before to directly answer to your question, I think that we need to clarify exactly what about we are talking. Because we spend our time to talk about language and transmission of knowledge and so on. But it's very important to know exactly about what about we are talking. First, when we talk about knowledge management, first, we have to know what is knowledge. In fact, you have three types of knowledge. The first one, I would call it traditional knowledge, and generally it's with limited numbers of people and for initiated people. You have the existing knowledge, and this existing knowledge is transferred to everybody by school, university, by publication, including through internet, and also by experienced people, because experience is a very important type of knowledge. Sometimes it's forgotten. I know that experience sometimes it's for more old people, but you may have brilliant exceptions where very young people have good experience, like Margarita. And also you have a third type of knowledge, which is the new knowledge. The new knowledge which require knowledge producers. That's something which is very important. And in fact, the last category as knowledge producer is mainly the scientific community. And to produce this knowledge, there is way, the business as usual, after doing scientific research. But sometimes also they have to answer to some questions which are raised by the civil society, by the politicians of the world. And also for this, we have to ensure that we have enough knowledge producer, because some species of knowledge producer are quite limited. For example, I will talk about the taxonomists. The taxonomists, now it's very rare. Okay, maybe now we understand that taxonomy is fundamental, but there is not a lot still on the earth. And also, we have to take in consideration the means which is given to scientists who work on nature. Today, when you make scientific research, you have to have a very big equipment, sophisticated equipment, satellites, huge electronics, and so on. But when we want to talk about biodiversity, we have to go on the field. And on the field, it's not very expensive, considering the other equipment. And also the problem that to work on the field as a bad image. You consider that when you are on the field, you are in holiday. That's generally the position of technocrats. So, as you know, that we have the knowledge, and after that we have the second problem, which is the transmission of knowledge. And for transmission of knowledge, you need to have, in French I would say, émetteur. I think the correct Spanish word is emissor. And you need to have a receptor. Scientists, okay, they have knowledge, but often they don't know how to communicate, or even they are reluctant to communicate. Because sometimes the questions which are raised are not directly within their work. It's a part of their work, but not the main part. And you have some category of scientists who want to remain good scientists, pure scientists, and just consider that they are important, that the number of publications, and publication in high-level review. But also you have a lot of scientists who got bad experience. Let me give you two examples. Both are related to fisheries. In my museum, we were requested to provide recommendation for quota of fisheries. So on the particular species, we recommend 20 tons a year. And there was a scientific institution from the fisheries department. They make a recommendation on 25 tons. More or less, we have the same basic data, but the museum want to be more careful. Then this goes to the fisheries department. And fisheries department said, oh, scientists are too much careful. So they decide to propose a quota of 30 tons. Then it goes to the minister, to the government, who got the pressure from fishermen and from all the lobby. So finally the minister decides to establish a quota of 30 tons. And then when we have got the official data of fishing at the end of the year, we got 60 tons. And when we got the figure, the pole of the fish, which was debarked from fish, the pole, we reached 80 tons. And when we calculate everything which has been sold on the market, we arrived to 90 tons. So, of course, at the end, the scientists said, why I spent so many times to make so many studies, to spend hours on the sea, which is not easy. And at the end, I recommend 20 tons, and you fish 90 tons. And I have another story also with my museum. We study a species on anchoy, and we make 1 year recommendation of, we estimate the stock. And with the fisheries, the scientific institution, we reach about 50, 60,000 tons. That's the stock. And we recommend a quota between 10, 15 tons. And we got a petition from members of the parliament who request to establish a quota at 140 on the stock of 50 or 60. So now, sometimes scientists say, why we ask us our advice? Because nobody take care after that. And so that's something which is very important. Of course, for communication, scientists need to be trained. Then also, they have to use a language which can be understood by everybody. For example, actually, we are talking a lot of biodiversity. Okay, all of us, or biological diversity, maybe, which is more correct. But go in the street, take 5 people by chance, and ask them what is biodiversity. Yes, I heard about. Even we have a pool opinion in Europe, which demonstrates that at minimum of 10% people understand. Even some consider that it was a trademark for yogurt. But ask them, what is nature? Everybody knows nature. Ask people, what is nature? Plants, animals, yes, that's nice. But we are always talking about biodiversity, and we want to address the general public. And of course, when you have these people who gave the message, they have to know to whom they are given the message. Because the way that it's provided is not the same if you are talking to public, to the press, to politicians, to young people, to private sectors, to administration, to enforcement agencies, justice, teachers, and so on. And also after that, the receptor have also to understand the people who send the message. That's very important. And also, you have to give credibility to these people. Don't be afraid, I will be not too long, but... and we have one particular aspect, which of course, I think it's the main place for the debate. It's a relationship between scientists and politicians. Politicians, it's difficult to train them because by definition, for the majority of them, a politician knows. You don't need to be trained to know or to be trained to get information. By definition, he knows. He has been elected, so he's the best, and he knows everything. So sometimes we have difficulty. But some of them want really to understand and want to be efficient and to take the most appropriate decision. But the problem is they don't know how to formulate a question to the scientist. And that's something which is very important, and we have to train the politicians also to properly ask good questions, because, and also they have to demonstrate, I would say, their honesty, because, you know, if you talk with scientists who perfectly know that's just for the politician to say that he consults the scientists but do not take care about what they will say, it's not real serious. But also the scientists have to really understand the needs of the politician. Because if the politician wants to act properly, he has specific needs, which are not the usual needs of the scientists. And it's very important also to train our scientists to have to be able to understand what are the needs of the politician. And of course, the scientist has to present credibility. Of course, we face to one problem, that generally scientists are paid by the politician through public money. It's true, but there is definitely a relationship. And there is no solution to that, because if scientists are not paid by the politician, they are paid by NGO who want to promote some ideas, or some private company which definitely have interest. But we have to take that in consideration. And also, so we raise, maybe we come back to your original question, how to organize this transmission. And definitely we need interface. Interface is very crucial, because in fact, it's, with my experience, you know, it's more or less a dream that all scientists will be trained to take to politicians, and all politicians will be trained to understand scientists. So interface is something which is very fundamental. The interface may be in the scientific world and know how to speak to politicians, or the interface may be within the politician who know how to speak to a scientist. But definitely, if you have a specialized institution, like Humboldt institution, who perfectly knows the scientist language and the politician language, and is able to make the translation if necessary, or at least to translate in an appropriate way, it's something which is very crucial, and from what I have seen everywhere in the world, that's the best efficient. So this type of agency, I will say, it's very crucial, because it's a way that they can exchange of information. So, nevertheless, we have a lot of questions, which are difficult. Maybe we can discuss about that also this morning. First, the independence. Independence of knowledge production. Scientists or institution managed by scientists. Sometimes it's good, but sometimes no. They don't, the scientists are not very good for administration. Then the second question is the viability of the information. Because, you know,
Voy a ir contigo, Bob, en 3, 2, 1, estoy contigo, Bob.
What we call by review by the pair. It's a good system, but sometimes it's not a good system, because I come from the scientific world and I know that you have a channel bias. And after that, also to control the chain of transmission. I don't know if you have the same expression here, but in French, we use a Arab telephone. You know? I give an information to this line. Have a look at the information which arrives at the end. It will be not the same. It's never the same. And just because there is modification of the transmission. But sometimes also, modification is made on purpose. And you have administration which receives the information from scientists and transmit other information to politicians. This it is. So how to control the way of transmission of the knowledge is something. There is also another problem. In which way we are doing the transmission of knowledge? The problem is dramatization or not. You may have both arguments are valid, because if you don't make a drama, nobody will take care, especially in this society today. But to dramatize too much, at the end you lost your credibility. You have to be honest. You have, of course, and sometimes it's not the case. because of the, I would say, the environment, and to be pleased with the public and so on. To be careful. How many times have heard scientists saying, within the end of the century, or it was at the former century, before the end of the century, the species will disappear. But the end of the century arrived and the species is still there. So it's very important also to, if we continue as we are doing now, the species will disappear. And we have to change. And maybe I will also to be careful with some use of words. I will finish, I guarantee you.
Thank you, Jean-Patrick.
Just give you this example. We are talking about ecosystem services. Ecosystem services, wonderful. Biodiversity provides ecosystem services, and it's something which is very useful for humanity. But that's not always the truth. I will take one example, the mosquito. You like mosquitoes? No. But you know, mosquito, when you have mosquito somewhere, this creates troubles to the human activities. You cannot have tourism, even ecotourism. You cannot farming activities. So it's not really mosquitoes, it's not a service. Maybe some people may consider that they're a service because when you have mosquitoes, you create a lot of economy behind to produce pesticides, to put the pesticide everywhere, to take the people in the hospital because they are sick of the... So this creates, of course, a lot of activity, human activities. I am not sure we can call that ecosystem services. And also we explain that, you know, there is a value for biodiversity. But sometimes it's not a value by themselves. We take this very short example. Recently you have an economic crisis in Greece. And some people say that, okay, but...
Un poquito más retirado, ¿no? Sí, sí, más o menos.
Okay. But it's quite simple, you know. Greece have a lot of islands, beautiful islands, they can sell them. This will solve the economic crisis. The only problem is that these islands are protected area, and where it's prohibited to build and so on. If they want to sell this island, you know, nobody will buy them. Nobody, or even very low price. But if you give the authorization to build a house, of course they can sell it a lot of price, which means that in this case, biodiversity has a value only if you destroy it. So that's a general problem of transmission of knowledge, manage of knowledge. It's not so simple, but maybe to have a very quick answer to your question. Humble institute and institutions like that are very useful. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Jean-Patrick. You have covered basically all the topics that we wanted to discuss over the morning, so that's very good. I would like to return to our original question about the relevance of a kind of national level institution that is providing support to policy decision making through knowledge and knowledge generation. And I would like to ask
Voy a ir con Carlos en 3, 2, 1, estoy con Carlos.
Of biological resources in South Korea is more linked to the science sector of the country. So you are not really expected to provide support to the environment sector. So perhaps you have a different view on that concerning the kind of role that is expected in your institution at the national level to support the government in policy decision making at various levels. So what are your views on that, Dr. Kim?
Thank you. Hola. Soy de Corea del Sur, Jinan Kim es su placer para celebrar el 20th aniversario de la. Thank you. Well, I just started Spanish 2 days before. Maybe there will be many progress later on.
Well, before I start my talk, I'd like to express my sincere thanks to Humboldt Institute for inviting me to this great and meaningful seminar. Well, even though Humboldt Institute and our institute have signed the MOU in 2011, but unfortunately there have been no big progress or no great progress between us, even though both institutes members have a strong desire of cooperation. But I think the geographical condition is the first barrier between us. But I hope further progress will solve this condition. And, well, to answer the question directly, I first raise something. Well, there is always both sides effect. If we made a big institute, many parts are good, but some parts are not good. And also, we made very several small institutes that is somewhat efficient, but it will need some cooperation or a combining system. So, in my case, I started my job from Forestry Research Institute, which was founded in 1920s. So the oldest research institute in Korea. And I studied avian research for a couple of years. And later on, our government have renewed the organization. So my department had to shift it to the National Institute of Environmental Research. And at the time, early 80s or early 90s, all the biological matters, biological issues are all in the Institute of Environmental Research. But after Rio Convention, the demands for the environment, demands for the biological resources are increased. So the government have to decide to build a new institution, specified institution. That's my present institution, the National Institute of Biological Resources, which was founded in 2007. Very new compared to Humboldt, only 7 years old, very young children. But our government decided big and powerful and specified institution is needed for the governmental scale. So I think in Colombia also, the Humboldt Institute need to be bigger than now to prepare all the demands from the government and all the rising issues. As you know, the Aichi target and also the Nagoya Protocol, which was ratified recently. So the Nagoya Protocol come into force on October, this coming October. So the Earth system will be adapted, will be changed to adopt the Nagoya Protocol. So many countries have to prepare the protocols. And also there is another raising issues from the climate change, from the other conventions. So to prepare the big, many global issue, global agenda, the institute need to be strong and need to be more step from the holistic approach, multidisciplinary approach is needed, I think. And before I arrived in Colombia, I just checked the website of Humboldt, but unfortunately, it was written in Spanish. So I use Googling, but the translation is not satisfied to me. Anyway, I think the Humboldt Institute have done many things, and the Humboldt Institute is very happy and good partner for Ministry of Environment. So to scope all the things in a national scale or in a South American scale. So the Humboldt Institute need to be a little bigger. But before that, I think we first need to check the mission and the vision of Humboldt Institute. What is the main purpose of your institute? What do you want to do in a final stage? So to think about that question, finally you will get the answers. And also I think SWOT analysis is also needed if you need it. And finally, I'd like to show some example from Korea. Well, just after the Korean War, Korea was the poorest country in the world. And in Korean War, I think Colombia dispatched soldiers to Korea, the only country from South America. Well, I'm very, very appreciate on this to Colombia. And after war, the Korea had to decide to be promoted from the less developed countries to developing countries. So the president decides to establish institute, Scientific and Technological Institute. That is, name is KIST, Korean Institute of Science and Technology. At the time, there was 3 or more small institutes. The president combined the institute all together and put many, many other missions. And many budgets are poured into the institute. And 10 years later, many, many products have been come from the institute. And from the foundation of the institute, nowadays Korea's economy can survive. But later on, the institute is too big, and they have to make some branch, and they have to make some centers, which is very specified for some field. And later, some center or some branches are independently departed, and they made their own institute. So it is gradually like evolution. So I think we do not need justify what we do not need cut the scale of the institute artificially. It can be decided from the demands and from the demands from the government, from the demands from the public. I think it's the best way of naturally of the institutional evolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. I think we got very different views on this, and then I would like to hear Christian's perspectives on this, and considering that, Christian, you were behind the establishment of the Humboldt Institute, and you were behind the vision of the Institute since its very beginning. So it would be very nice to hear from you about this same perspective 20 years later.
Bueno, buenos días.
Good morning.
Es emocionante.
It is exciting and gratifying, frustrating, whatever adjective you want to use 20 years later, after starting with Humboldt Institute. And I feel nostalgic, reminiscent, because 20 years ago we started with Pablo Leiva, Maria Sana, a group of Manuel Rodriguez, working on this seed, this idea of what the Humboldt Institute would have been. And the most important thing is that I'm very proud of Humboldt Institute, of how much we've advanced and our position and what we have achieved 18th. I'm going to start with the answer, and then I'm going to talk about certain details. The question is whether national institutes are relevant. My answer is yes, they are, but they're not enough. And it has to do with the fact that they're relevant has to do with many of those political decisions are taken on the at a national scale. But as Braulio said yesterday, since we signed the convention, the property national policies and every policy and decisions are made at the national level. But at the same time, I think that there's something very important. It's not enough because the knowledge it has no boundaries. And you need to remember that big advances in knowledge, even as diverse as Colombia is, a lot of biodiversity is shared with other countries in Colombia. So we need knowledge beyond our borders, and we need to acknowledge that a lot of that knowledge is generated in Colombia. The advantage here is our scientific capacity that is important in the region, and we have traditional knowledge that is very important. And on that note, when we build and when we have research institutions, these are agencies that have interface, and they are border agencies, as you said, between politics and science. And I think it's important, as long as Humboldt Institute, when we started, Humboldt Institute can't be just another institute. Humboldt has to be the institute building bridges between scientific community and decision makers. In Colombia, there's a lot of scientific community, but that knowledge wasn't being communicated at the right time, with the right language, at the right time, to be useful to the environmental system. And at the same time, the environmental system agencies they weren't asking the right questions. So we do have a niche on the capacity. Humboldt is like a membrane between those two sectors. I'd say that we have a membrane and a catalyzer at the same time. That we need to accelerate processes and see that knowledge will help in decision making. I think we said something that is very important. I was thinking about what happened in the last 20 years, what's changed from the time that we started. And there are global trends that are important, and in the country that are important. Population. In the last 20 years, the world population has increased in 1.7 billion people. So there is a big increase. And this morning I was looking at it, and in 1994 in Colombia, the population was 35 million people. Today we're 47. So we have 12 million more Colombians today than when Humboldt Institute started. Not only that, globalization and all the demand, because we have improvement in the quality of life and the big trends. We have seen growth in middle class, and in the last 20 years, we've had more than 1.5 billion people who have become middle class with resources demand that is a lot bigger, and there is an urbanization process that is bigger. And the last year, out of the 7 billion people in the world, more than 50% of them were living in cities. And there is a trend that is ongoing. And Latin America, out of the region, the most urbanized one is Latin America in the world. And it has important implications in terms of access to knowledge, the amount of resources. And the other big trend is globalization. Today, we have lost borders not only in knowledge but in demand of resources. While economic growth between 1960 and 2010 doubled from 3 to 6 billion, in the same period, the economy grew more than 6 times. So today we see that there's a big trend where we have globalization, and many of natural resources are being produced in one continent to be brought to another one. We have excess of consumption globally, so population and demand of urbanization, globalization, and demand of resources is very big. And I want to talk about it because Humboldt Institute has to position itself as relevant for a society like the Colombian one and other countries, and how Humboldt will answer the big needs of Bogota, Cali, Casanare, Medellin, Buenaventura. So we have food, water, energy, and all these issues, of course, how knowledge management is relevant for these type of subjects. So, and we can talk about it later. And I think that this is innovation. That is our title, and I think that the national system has important innovation. The role in Colombia, we have the 99 Act, and we say, it's beautiful, but we have sustainable growth. We have the Environmental National Council. That's beautiful. 20 years later, I think that some things have evolved, some haven't, and we have 5 institutes today. We have an Environmental National Council that will integrate with the environmental sector and the social sector and economic development. We can talk about that. But I do believe that today it is worth talking about how relevant it is and what we learn from other countries. And I want to close with a comment. When we started building the Humboldt Institute, the first thing we did was visiting other experiences in other countries to see what was out there, and it was great for us because we built an institute, taking certain elements from the Inderena, but we spent 2 years with Margarita thinking about how to go about it, putting fires out and all that. And another an important reflection was Conavio in Mexico. Mexico is a country that has a big institutional capacity, a lot of 200 and some universities, where we needed an agency working, linking that information and translating it. Costa Rica is a country has a very small institutional capacity, so they needed to have a collection, and there was a lot to do at Envío, and Humboldt in Colombia was about halfway there. We had more capacity, but at the same time we had more gaps in knowledge, and our reflection in that workshop 15 years ago. Humboldt Institute wouldn't work in Costa Rica, and Envío wouldn't work in Colombia. Each country has a different context, and what I would say is that the context in Colombia and Humboldt today in Colombia is differently enough in terms of 3 things that are very valuable. The amount of knowledge existent, access to knowledge, and the capacity to generate it. So those things have improved a lot. They have changed a lot. They're changing very rapidly. And when we talk about the Humboldt 20 years down the line, I think we need to examine that, because in 20 years Humboldt should be different, very much different to the one that we imagined 20 years ago. Thank you very much, Christian. I think that it's been a first round. It's been very much productive, and with a lot of elements that are key to rethink, to analyze them, and lessons learned that are applicable to any country. We're talking about something that is not only good for the Colombian context, but it could apply. We have less than half an hour for this first part of the panel, and I would like to have a dialogue. I would like to speak, to have very concrete answers, very quick, and so that we can have a more dynamic discussion.
quisiera, bueno, de pronto es mucho mejor si hago la pregunta en inglés, de tal forma que es quizás más rápido. So what I was saying before is that for the next 20 minutes of this first session, I would like just to invite you all to provide very short answers to specific questions so we can make this dialogue more dynamic. And the next question is about the fact that very often when we are providing technical and scientific support to policy and decision making, we find out that we don't have the right information for a very quick response to those needs. And then we always have to face the fact that we need more research, or sometimes it's a lack of data, sometimes it's that the data is there but it's not available. There are various issues. So connecting science with policy is a big challenge. And the question is it a lack of data, information, and knowledge? Is it a lack of integration? Or is it perhaps that we need to change the questions and the type of knowledge that we are generating? So that's the next question. Dr. Sarukan, please.
Muy rápido.
Very quickly. A lot of times, the problem is that maybe the questions are, we don't know what to ask for a certain problem. And we go again, whether it is, the egg or the chicken, but we need a lot of work in trying to drive people who are going to ask questions, to make better questions, and not to try to answer questions that don't make any sense. That's very dangerous. The first thing. But the other thing that I want to place ahead is that for one of our countries that are very, very complex, culturally, history, ecological, biological, there is no way of having an answer for every question, even intelligent questions. So, but we do need more research. But the answer, answering, I can't answer that question because I need to do more research. It's not right, So we need to know how to go about it. But I would think to introduce an issue, and I hope that we can talk later on. And it is for these institutions to work, we need a certain stool. I don't know what semantics in Spanish is kind of complicated. Maybe a tripod. Something with three legs first. We need a government vision that is interested in having information to make good decisions, and the other one is academia that is committed in participating and helping to generate information, and the third one is a society that is informed, honest, intelligible, and accessible. If we don't have those three things, and generally it doesn't work the way they should. And as Christian said, this bridge between academia and government, there has to be a bridge between the other two things and society. And this is what an institution, like the ones that we're talking about, has to undertake the task and see how we can go about doing it. And later we were talking about institutional credibility. I think that is a very important point, and then maybe we can elaborate.
Patrick.
Yes, I think that you raise one important question, which is emergency, because that's a serious problem. Generally, scientists are asked with questions, and we need an immediate answer. But generally, it's impossible. If you have to study a species, you have to take into consideration the nesting season, whatsoever. It takes time. I always remember that 10 years ago, I was trying to promote to local authority in the island of La Réunion a study of the ecology of shark. They laugh a lot. You imagine we will pay to study the shark, so people will go on the sea. And then last year, you know that there was a lot of attack of shark to people, to swimmers and so on. So it's become very political. We have to do something, of course. But so the local authority called me and said, yes, what we have to do? I say, sorry, we cannot do anything. If we want to make a study on the shark, their behaviors, their ecology, we need at least 3 years. So many people will be eaten since. So the only way is to ask people not to swim. Impossible. Of course. But the problem is to the sharks within 2 weeks, it's also impossible. And that we have, there is one solution, which is to anticipate. Because sometimes for a lot of things, we are perfectly aware that something will happen, we will get a problem. But generally, because it's not an important problem, because it's not a dramatic situation, we say, okay, we have other emergency, we will take later. And I think that when you have institutions which have not only the scientific knowledge, but also the capacity to anticipate what will happen, what will be the problem, is something very important, and it can be one of the functions of an institute like Humboldt to say that in the future we may have such and such problem. We have to start study now and to talk with the scientists to find the good specialists. Sometimes they need to be trained, and to also to the politician, you need to have provide money to do that. And I know it's not easy, especially when you're talking about animals. Okay, it's butterfly, birds. Oh, very nice. But why to spend money for that? And so I think this emergency problem is maybe something we have to be taken in consideration. And in fact, institute, you know, the interface between science and policy, that's typically an example where they play a crucial role.
I would say that we have three things: the amount of information, excess of information, and relevance of information. Never before, we had more information available than the one we had today. It isn't enough. There are many gaps. For example, in Colombia, we have many. But we can say that we need this and that. There is a lot of information. And while we have advanced in systematizing information, not only in Colombia but abroad, and to make it relevant for important issues, again, we need to see what we have, what we need, prioritize, and we need a clear agenda. And this are the strategic gaps that we have in Colombia, so that we can generate information, not consider everything, but I am very much worried of what's going on with the Colombian technology and science system, and this is something parallel and is part of the information. The second thing is access. Not only do we have a lot of information, but is it available? And while we have advanced in digitalize and gather all this information, today we're talking about billions and billions of registries that are available. And as free, we overpass all kinds of barriers of institutional politics, technological ones. But it is worth making a differential between information and knowledge. One thing is, why is it good, for Governor Casanare to have access to 785,000 biological registry if they don't have a format that he could use and is useful for him and is relevant for him? And this is where here we have this type of institution law to make that information relevant, concise, and in many cases to have scenarios in the future. And this is something that scientists, it makes us itch, because we say we're talking about the method, scientific method, and this is an absolute answer, and it doesn't work on that context. We need scenarios, and to talk to the minister, and this is where we are, this is where we're going to get, and these are my 3 scenarios. We need this, and that to get there. And then we have a weather change panel, microsystem assessment, and all these tools so that we can use information and make it relevant for people.
Excellent. Dr. Kim.
Okay. When we are talking about the scientific evidence, we need to be very careful. That's because I'd like to make some examples. The reeded petrol and freon gas, which was invented early century by Thomas Midgeley. He was a very, very clever scientist. But these two chemicals were invented in a good purpose for humankind. But nowadays, it is regarded the worst chemicals in the world, which impact our universe, our global. So from the beginning, everybody do not know the effect. The scientists did not know anything about it. And another example is dodo and dodo tree, the relationships. After dodo extinction in the Mauritius Island, the dodo tree has no sprout. But after a few hundred years later, nobody knows about the relationship between dodo birds and dodo trees. This is science. The science is insufficient. And we always need more and more data to give evidence, proof or evidence to the policies. But the problem is the policy and decision maker wants very quick and very simple answer, like to do or not to do. So it is very difficult for us to decide with our very limited information and data. So we need some more data, but later on we have to provide good evidence or best possible anticipations. So that's our dilemma. So I think we need to get more information from other countries, from other societies, to minimize the gap. And we also need to identify the gap between the realistic and present our data. So we need to minimize the gap. That's my point.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Actually, you have touched on a very important point, and is that to a certain extent, with science, we always have gaps in terms of knowledge generation. And the problem in linking science with policy is that policy requires to have some good level of certainty. And the main problem is that in science, we don't have that concept in. We have uncertainty, actually. So how to deal with that? How to manage the scientific uncertainty in a context where politicians and the society are expecting very certain, clear answers on very specific topics, black and white type of thing. Dr. Sarucano.
Otra vez. Bueno, yo
Again, I go back to the egg and the chicken. We need to do an education work with them, and that is never ending because they change all the time. You know, with each new leader of administrators and scientists, we need to ask to start. It's one of the challenges of the type of work that we conduct, and we need to undertake it, and we have to do it well. And we need to do is that there is no such thing, and the best information possible is the one that is usable, because that's the one we have. The other option is to use information to make decisions. So I think that we have to have a presence before politicians in terms of making them see things, and that presence will be stronger as long as there is credibility of what we've done before. And again, we're talking about institutional credibility, and maybe it's important to touch on it, because I think will be more important later on. And if it is something that the audience is interested in, because we continue to talk about things that we think you're interested in, but I'm not sure that you are, you know. So I would rather, it would be your interacting with us. So I think that's something that is necessary, and to have an education of jobs, and I'm going to call it that way. And politicians, they're not idiots, and they do understand certain things, so there is ways to communicate to them, and we can say a lot in the right way. And I think it would be a mistake for us to have this horrible trap of, if I don't have 100% certainty of something that's going to happen, then I can't say anything, because I'm not sure, because there is 0.001% of probabilities I'm going to be mistaken, you know. So then you just shoot yourself and get out of the system and don't work anymore. So I don't see any other way.
Yes, also I think that we have to be careful, because it's true that science, there is some incertitude. Okay, we can talk with probability. If you are doing that, there is high level of probability that something happens or whatsoever. And okay, politicians don't like it, you know, because first, it's their function, basic function, to take decision. So we have to recognize they have to take a decision. You cannot say, oh, a decision is maybe half white, half black. They have to take the decision, to say yes or to say no. It's their responsibility. Of course, generally, what they want is to be covered. You know, if something won't happen, they will say it's not their responsibility because they were badly advised. But also, in a lot of cases, we perfectly know what will happen. There is no uncertainty. I can guarantee you that if in an area you cut all the trees where bees and nests and so on, you will have no pollinator, and after that you will have no fruit. That there is no uncertainty on that. It's 100% sure. And in fact, for a lot of things, we know, we have enough knowledge. The other things, okay, we need to acquire and so on. And also in this case, you have another problem, which is the competence. You know, when we are talking to scientists, some scientists become competent when they have worked many years on a subject. And we don't have in any country in the world, maybe in the US, even I'm not sure, but that is not in France, not in Colombia, you don't have specialists of everything. So when you have a need, you need to also to cooperate with other specialists, because they are not in your country, but maybe they are in the country beside and so on. So it's also very important to be a member of a network that you can very quickly identify who can provide you information or training for a scientist. It will take some years to be trained, but after that you can use it. And so also I think that it's something very important. It's the international knowledge, not to spend your time to reinvent the wheel also, that we are doing a lot everywhere. And so, for example, the Humboldt Institute has connection with a lot of other institutions all over the world. So if there is a need, they are able to identify very quickly who is the specialist we may provide the information. Because not all information exists, but a lot of information exists. And we have already a lot of knowledge. We don't know everything, but we know enough to be at least a minimum of confident.
The point is, Juan Carlos, with your permission, I'm changing the format. I want to ask the panel and others for us to think about it too. two things. First, we're always talking about this Biodiversity Institute, and we always talk about 5 elements. Humboldt, Inbio, Zambia in South Africa, and now the Korean one. But we have 5, 6, 7, 8. My question is this is so wonderful. Why don't we have 100? And as we said before, you said, Jose, we have delegations from all these countries and they come visit, and we're going to create one in Ecuador. So my question is, why this hasn't replicated in other places? I'm looking at Braulio because it would be interesting with his experience why he's not replicating, and among other things. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, there was a proposal in the United States by Bruce Babbitt when he was Interior Secretary to create a United States Biological Service parallel to the Biological Service, and something specialized, and they failed. The United States don't have one, so the United States don't have a Humboldt. Why? That's a question. And my other question is this: if these institutes are not working, they're not enough, I would like to ask all experts, and people who go online, what is the most interesting model that you've seen in the last 5 years? Complying and meeting all this function with this membrane between political biodiversity and science, which could be very different to Humboldt. If we're talking about institutional innovation, then what are those who are very, very new and would be useful to Colombia at this time?
Maybe I can answer to one particular point, because in France, we don't have a Humboldt. That's true. I worked sometime in the cabinet of the minister, and I was in charge to prepare more or less such a project. But before it was finished, the minister changed. So there was another project, and recently, last year, we got a new project from the government. But now, it was prepared, it's even in front of the parliament, but the minister changed. And the new minister for the timing is asking question, is it really useful? Is it really well done? And in fact, there is a lot of problem because of competition between institutions, because the old institutions, they were on the top before, and they want to remain on the top. And you are talking about fusion. And I think that's something very useful and very crucial. But people don't like fusion. When they belong to an organization, they want to remain. And to be honest, I belong to an organization, National Natural History Museum, which was created in 1635. And we are not ready to be mixed with an institution which have only 50 years old. That's difficult for us. But nevertheless, it's a problem. And it's true also that like to have something humble, that to have also exchange between these institutions. Normally in CDB, we more or less have the substar, which is to be used for this purpose. But unfortunately, there is still a lot of politicians and not scientists who are participating in substar. And generally, they create big problems. Huh? You can have a look on the proceedings of the last one. You have some country, they create problem. And but when we discuss with scientists, okay, we cannot agree on everything, but more or less, we have the same problems.
Let me ask you the second question. What's the most exciting thing, new institutional innovation you've seen out there in the last 3 years?
Where, in France?
Anywhere. Anything exciting?
Okay, no.
Pero, ¿qué quieres que contestemos eso ahora? ¿Hay tiempo?
Do you want us to answer that right now? Do we have time? We could do it now. I don't think there is, one single answer. What's going on in the States is different from what's going on also in Europe or anywhere else. In Great Britain, every agency has a name. Okay, every bird has a name. and I forgot the name of the bird. So like a bunch of ornithologists, and here we have different names, but in places where a tree in Costa Rica or in Colombia, has more leaves, than all the ants in the British Islands. Why do we need something like that? There are other ways of sorting out things, and I think this the same in the States. The information is gigantic, and we're trying to have 8 to 10 Goliath to get a super Goliath. So there's no way of doing this. Their institutions are very powerful, and they do have information. And in other places, there is the other way around, because governments aren't interested, and they're not educated, and they're not sensitized to do this. So I think that there is a lot of answers, and I have no problems in talking about it. But for me, it would take a lot.
Dr. Kim, would you like to say something about that?
Well, this is about your questions, the second questions, about the decision-making of the policies. Well, the biology is different, very different from mathematics and chemicals. We do not have any answer, good answer. We have many answers. So there are many factors which can be affected to make decisions. So I'd like to scope with this problem. We need to make decision makers' mind change to environmental friendly or biological friendly. If he knows a little than before, he will not dare to make a very, very difficult decisions. That will not begin. So it is, I think, one of the most important things for us to do. Education or changing the paradigm to the public is the most one, I think. Thank you.
Gracias. Pero por supuesto, claro que sí.
No, pero creo que José tiene...
I think that you're absolutely right. There are many explanations, because the big majority of countries don't have these type of situations. But there are different solutions in different countries. There are different arrangements. We think that countries, I think it's interesting to look at other sectors, how they have resolved solutions. We have more traditional sectors, energy, and they have sorted out this type of problems. They have institutions that do comply with that role, gathering all scientific information and supporting political decisions. And there is a big variety of institutions. But in our area, environmental area, especially biodiversity, and more recently, we're still developing this and implementing systems and creating institutions. So I think that we need a big effort internationally to promote it, and maybe to gather information from different models and institutions existing to meet that role, and the good results that we have gotten. So it would be important like to have institutions like Humboldt, Carnavio, the Biological Resources Institute in Korea. That would help us gather case studies benefiting this type of institutes and different realities for the countries. Maybe it's very clear here, but it isn't clear for other countries. But maybe to identify different modalities to explore in different countries. Like Christian said, it's difficult that one model is going to work in different countries, but maybe, we could have different options for each country. It's difficult. It's difficult. In the United States, they don't have something. But the United States Congress for many years have had an institution to do this. So when the Congress got bills, before placing it before Congress for discussion, they had an institute that was part of the National Congress, and it would make that bridge with scientific institutions to gather information and work with Congress members, and it worked out. But it doesn't happen. It didn't happen anymore.
Yes, maybe I found an answer to your question. But this also illustrates a lot. It's better like that. Okay, it illustrates also some very serious problem we face. It's the time, the interference of nothing which have to done with biodiversity. I think that within the last 3 years, we have the creation of IPBS, International Platform for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. But I have to remind you that the idea was launched at a conference in UNESCO in 25, and at least both of you were present. And so the idea was launched by the French President of the Republic. And then we start to discuss how to implement it. We create IMOSEB, a lot of discussion and so on. So after that, we travel all over the world. We go to Nairobi, to Busan, to many places. And finally, IPBS was created in Panama in 2012, if I am correct. And now it starts, and even the last meeting was quite successful because we reached an agreement on a work program. It was difficult to believe, but we obtained that. And actually, I think that even on the world basis, on national basis, I still don't have no example. But on a world basis, I would say that IPBS has been created, that for the time being, it's a good thing. I hope it will remain it.
To wrap up about innovation, that doesn't work everything, but it does work out one part, and this is important, and it is culturalization of biodiversity, to open the option of culture and how important of biodiversity is for society. And this is the capacity that we have here. We have naturalists in Costa Rica. You're doing it also. This is a way of bringing people forward, and it's not the only solution, but it's one of those three legs of the stool, and it's getting stronger. Great. I want to thank our panel members and for this great dialogue so far. We are going to have a break, snack, and following, the last talk. I want you to think about a question: how to involve society, not only as receptors of knowledge, but to take part on building knowledge and using knowledge. This is going to be difficult. And our panel members, we're not going to gather questions, but we're going to open a dialogue with the audience. Thank you. In any case, We'll come back at 11 here. You know, those who want to ask questions in writing, you know, that will be great because we are gathering them.